Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody got a chance to go see some of the keynote this morning, hear about some of the very exciting things that AWS is launching in the compute space and data analytics space and artificial intelligence. It's kind of an overwhelming amount of launches, so take a few days to kind of digest and figure out how you're going to start to apply some of those launches. I'm really excited that everybody came this morning to hear us talk about higher education and how higher education is using Amazon Workspaces. So I'm joined with a couple of people on stage with me today. We've got Greg Smith from University of Maryland University College, and we've got Peter Zielinski, who's going to be speaking a little bit about George Washington University School of Business. So we really wanted to kind of take some time and describe a little bit about how higher education is providing innovative desktop solutions to faculty and staff who need access to applications and information from around the globe in a very evolving and rapidly changing desktop environment. Ultimately, you're going to see how these guys are using Amazon Workspaces to build solutions to meet those needs. So if we'll go ahead and have a seat, guys, and we'll get started here for a few minutes. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of Amazon Workspaces to get started with for anybody who doesn't have kind of context on what we're doing. And then we'll get a chance to hear about the solutions, and then after that, we'll have a chance to kind of have a discussion with these guys, and I'll ask some questions, and then have the opportunity for everyone in the audience to ask some questions. So our goal when we launched Amazon Workspaces was to provide a desktop environment that was available in the cloud, that felt very fast and fluid and very native and very much the same as using a regular desktop to the end user who was interacting with that desktop. When you launch an Amazon Workspace, we're launching a full virtual machine, so you get fast, consistent performance over time. It should always feel like you're running on a native machine, no matter if we've launched one or if we launched 10,000 of those workspaces. We also wanted to make sure that experience was available globally, so wherever you are, you can get access to an Amazon Workspace that has that performance characteristic. So today we support Amazon Workspaces in 7 regions across the globe, giving that access globally and that high performance globally. At the same time, we wanted to support you connecting from whatever device type you had at your disposal. So that has meant for us supporting Macs, PCs, iOS devices like iPads, Android devices, mobile devices, also zero client and thin client solutions. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we announced support for web browsers. So we added support to connect to your workspace from Chrome and from Firefox. As with any AWS product, the goal with Amazon Workspaces is to have it be pay as you go. So that is, you only pay for what you use while you're using it. So you spin up the number of workspaces you need. When you stop needing them, you shut them down and you stop paying for them. We wanted that to be at a price point that was very compelling. So the Amazon Workspaces product is available in a couple of different models. There's a monthly billing model, and there's an hourly billing model we launched a couple of months ago now. The hourly product starts at a minimum of $8 a month when you look at typical usage, and then we scale up from there. So designed to really be a cost-effective option for people who need to have a solution quickly. Those fees include all of the components you need for the desktop to work. It includes the running instance itself. It includes all of the storage, so the C drive and the D drive, the EBS volumes for that. It also includes backups that we do to S3 to ensure that you have your data in case of some sort of disaster. And it also includes all of the streaming. So all of the streaming coming out of the workspace is not billed as network traffic. As we launched Amazon Workspaces, it became clear for us that for our desktop to be useful for IT administrators, it had to not require them to make massive changes in the way that they administer desktops today. So it needed to integrate with their own existing methodology and tools for administering and launching and maintaining desktops. Effectively, we needed to have it be a hybrid IT solution so that you could have a hybrid of your on-premises mechanisms for managing desktops, for managing your cloud desktops. So to do that, we've had a couple of key integration points. First off, on identity, we support Active Directory integration. So when you launch an Amazon Workspace, it is just an Active Directory domain joined instance, which means it shows up and uses all of the existing mechanisms that you have for administering desktops. That means for identity, you're using your AD passwords, AD username to log into that. It also means that all of the tools you have on premises like SCCM or group policy all just apply directly. It's just a standard Windows desktop. In addition to that, we wanted to use your existing mechanisms for authentication. So if you're using Radius for multi-factor authentication to add an extra layer of security for access, we support that as part of Amazon Workspaces. So you can integrate existing MFA solution just directly into the Amazon Workspaces environment. Now, that all being said, what we found as we've worked with partners like Greg and Peter is that everybody has their own mechanisms for doing these things, and it's pretty tough to predict what those are going to actually be in practice. So one of the core attributes of this is that we really want to have customers driving innovation on top of Amazon Workspaces. So we publish APIs that give information and controls and capabilities to our customers, and they can build solutions on top of Amazon Workspaces. So in part, of course, it's a fully managed desktop service, but in part it's also a set of building blocks that our customers are using to build solutions inside of their environments. So and I think you're going to be pretty impressed when you see what these guys have done with that capability. Now, that's a little bit of background about Amazon Workspaces in general, but we've also really begun to dive in deeply with partners who in the education space, and we began to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the education space that is uniquely addressed by Amazon Workspaces. So one of the top things we see is that there's really a merging of the different categories of student. So the difference between somebody who's a traditional learner in a classroom or in a lab or on campus and somebody who's a remote learner who's doing online training or who's doing online classwork is kind of fading away. So they've got very similar needs, very similar attributes these days. So a broad diversity of needs across those different environments. So at the same time, those students are bringing with them an incredible level of existing IT infrastructure that they own and maintain. So they all have their own high-speed access from home. They've got Wi-Fi, they've got LTE and 4G connectivity from mobile devices. Frequently they have multiple different devices that they own. They've got phones, they've got tablets, they've got laptops, they've got desktops, they've got web browsers of various kinds and Chromebooks. And so there's this huge opportunity to advance the options for people to get to their workspaces and get to the environments through using those mechanisms and those things that the students are bringing to the table. But at the same time, there's some risk there. There's some concern because now you have a broad proliferation of endpoints that you have to support. So the security surface area is exploding a little bit. There's a lot of different ways that students can do things that you don't necessarily want them to do. I'm sure these guys have horror stories at various levels. So there's a lot of risk to be considered there. But at the same time, you can't have that be a reason not to give them access to the applications that they need to get their learning done. And so you want to have that application that's available on a desktop be something that they can get to without necessarily exposing yourself to some of that risk. So from the Workspaces perspective, we feel like we've got a couple of key attributes that really address these concerns. First off, of course, is we really wanted to have something that was mobile by design. So we want to have a mechanism for folks to get to their workspace from any device, and I think we've really addressed that we've done that already. Whether that's in a particular region in the US or whether that's globally, you always have that access and capability. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that we can address that need for them to do that from the device of their choice. So we have a sort of bring your own device mentality, which is that the students have the option to use workspaces on their own devices, and then that becomes their personal sphere and where they're interacting, and then the workspace becomes the environment where they're really interacting with the learning environment. From a security perspective, there's none of the data going onto that local device. There's nothing that's, whether that's intellectual property or whether that's applications, they're completely segmented from that perspective. So the local device is not part of that kind of network environment where all of the assets for universities exist. And then, of course, the real goal here is to be able to get access to those applications, and it's a very nice story for the content developers and for the universities and educators. All of the existing applications you have that run on Windows are going to run on the Workspaces environment. So now, in effect, what you've done is you've solved this challenge of how do I take all of my apps that are desktop-enabled and make them available without having to go through some of the heavy lifting involved in moving to SaaS models or having to web-enable all of that content. And so in this world, you get to use those applications that may be real-world applications that students need to get hands-on time with through the workspace and save some of that challenge. And of course, for those of you who didn't see, yesterday we announced support for Windows 10. So now that application set is much broader. So Windows 7 and Windows 10 applications will run fine on top of Amazon Workspaces. All right. That's the quick marketing spiel done. And I wanted to give an introduction to Greg Smith from University of Maryland University College. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the solutions they're building on top of Amazon Workspaces.
Thank you, Nathan. Before we get into this just a little bit, I want to give you history or a quick snapshot of what UMUC is, because when everybody hears University of Maryland, they think go Terps. We're not that campus. We're one of the campuses that's part of the Maryland system, but we're primarily distance education. Our students are all over the world. As it says, we have 84,000 students with 95 different degree programs. Our students could be sitting at the Starbucks around the corner or downrange in a tent in Afghanistan, and we're providing educational content to them for their retooling or their degree-seeking program. So we have some challenges that I think the traditional college campuses don't necessarily have. So as we keep that in mind, we have 4 different use cases that we're using at University of Maryland, and we'll talk specifically about one of them. But want to also mention that our IT staff are using Workspaces as kind of a platform into the rest of the restricted network. So we're kind of keeping their local devices out of the mix. Contractors and consultants, as opposed to giving them laptops or scrambling Monday morning when they show up and you didn't know that they were coming, we're able to provision a workspace with the applications that they would need within a matter of minutes. And then we have approximately 250 sites all around the world that have various levels of testing center and computer labs available to them. We're currently testing zero footprint devices in these locations running workspaces. So as we look to reduce costs and maintenance and overhead, because some of these 250 locations are literally on base in Afghanistan that we don't have a whole lot of access to for managing the systems, this is one of our use cases. The one that I'll talk about a little bit more in depth is Project Triton, which is our foray into the classroom for all students. This was born from an RFP, a failed RFP. We brought in 11 or so vendors from all the big players, all of when you think of the VDI services, you would think these folks would be at the table. They were. None of them got it. None of them understood. And I glibly sent a text message to my boss during one of these sessions saying I can do it better. And he responded, prove it. And so I'm here today. We went off and we realized that we needed to get some help from Amazon in terms of prioritizing roadmap. And when a school approaches you and says, hey, we really love your product, but we need you to completely shuffle around some stuff that you're doing to accommodate us. There was some skepticism, but willingness to work with us to kind of get that done. And some of the things that we needed to be able to do was SSO integrate into our classroom. So we wanted to make sure that this was an experience for our students that was not an add-on, that this was part of what they were doing and part of the interactions that they were having in the learning process. So they didn't have 7 different passwords to remember, like the existing or the incumbent vendor that we were dealing with, because they couldn't tie to our directory system and they couldn't tie to the resources that we had on campus. So there were no less than 7 different passwords our cybersecurity students needed to use to access this resource. That was unacceptable for us. We needed to be able to have this all available via the web, which was announced in November 18th, I think was the official announcement. We had been working with Nathan's team to provide this to our students for a couple months before that. And then we needed the auto stop model, the billing per hour, to really be able to support the scale that we were looking at. And so after much work between the teams and some trips out for one of our lead solutions folks to Seattle to sit with the engineers of the Workspaces team, we launched this offering to our students in about 3 months. So we were able to working with Amazon, create the SSO integration, be able to access these other resources, and they were able to prioritize and help us get this ready in about 3 months. One of the other things it does for our students is that we're now able to understand how they learn through the learner analytics that we're collecting through things like Liquidware Labs, Stratosphere product, and some of the other information we're gathering through Xenos and whatnot. So we're able to provide this information to our learning teams to refactor the experiences that our students are doing or the projects or the labs that they're doing in our environment. Because we're not in the business of failing students, we're in the business of educating students. And so what we want to do is make sure they're successful in doing that. And if we can understand patterns of the successful student, that helps our population in general. We're at 3,200 users today who are actively using the platform. So we went from 0 to 3,200 users in 3 months on the platform. So it was quite the ramp. We'll be a little over 7,000 students using our platform when the semester starts up in January. In the first 2 months of activity, we had 160,000 hours of usage from our students. From 3,200 students, we had 160,000 hours of usage with 30 support tickets. And so to put some context in that, that is approximately 4 times as much usage and 35% fewer support tickets than the incumbent vendor or the vendor that was providing services in our environment today. Some feedback that we've gotten from our faculty and our staff, I'm sorry, I'm a slide behind here, is that we have had a material impact on the way that our students are learning. So to hear that this technology that we're adding into our classroom is making students and helping students learn better and differently is fantastic. Because I'm not one that learned the traditional model in a classroom. I needed to hands-on, touch, manipulate, and work with it. And that's what Workspaces allowed us to do. And the faculty have called the experience transformational and fantastic. We had a traditional VDA vendor that was not able to scale for us. This project was stood up, developed by an independent team that acted as a startup within the organization. So we went out and hired 10 people to do this, and we got that done in about 3 months. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter at George Washington University.
Hello, Piotr Zieliński. I work at the business school at George Washington University, and I think this presentation is a great selection of 2 of us, because we are, in a sense, the opposite of what UMUC is doing. And we don't have a big IT team. We don't have a lot of resources that we can dedicate to support our students, and we are not centralized IT for those who are not in the higher education. So just a quick background. There are 2 different types of IT support teams at universities. There is central IT, and in the schools there are usually smaller teams. So we are the small team in the School of Business. We have a huge central IT team that provides central services. So we are kind of on the other spectrum, and this is one of the reasons we like to to engage with AWS, because we are small, but we feel that we are important. So we provide our services to 3,600 students and 130 faculty, and and 200 staff members. And just when I was preparing for this presentation, I was like, I would pick one reasons why we work with workspaces. So frequently when colleges and schools, they plan to expand, they think in terms of on the academic side, nowadays especially they have plans, go to open programs overseas, have international programs, distance learning programs, and not that many. Oops, I'm one slide behind. So. I'm sorry, I got, yeah, okay. So, while administrators and deans are busy planning and the faculty planning the academic side, none of them really thinks that much about how we're going to support those programs. So we have a very interesting case not that time ago when we have a distance learning program, and one student from Kansas calls and he says, there is an assignment that I'm supposed to do, and there is the software that you use, but I don't have the software and it's kind of expensive to buy it, so how am I supposed to do it? And the answer was like, why don't you come to our lab and do it? And he's like, but I'm in Kansas. Like, okay, that is a problem. So it turned out that the faculty who was teaching that particular class didn't think about how the students were about to access the software, because the software was always on campus. So when the program expanded to a distance learning module, then we had this gap. So from the growth perspective, we needed a solution that will allow us to provide those support to distance learning students. And also we have several computer labs that are, as all computer labs at some point have to be replaced, and we are located in Washington, D.C. To build a new building is extremely expensive. We reached almost the full capacity of our building, and so the space is very valuable, and there are plans to convert those computer labs to classrooms, and so there was the idea that then we move all the computers to some kind of virtual lab. And then, as Greg mentioned, there are a lot of solutions that probably work well in the private sector or even public sector, but educational space is very unique, and it would be probably very rare to find a company that is driven by so many different conflicting requirements. So as you know, in higher education, faculty are most important people. They drive all the decisions. So we try to support them. Okay. Okay, so I mentioned that we have a couple of labs a couple of classes that we decided to support in a different way. So at this moment, we have 130 workspaces. There are 8 classes that actively use workspaces. We have 6 faculty members that we selected for this pilot, and we grew significantly without any advertisement. So that was kind of a student-driven process. We opened this. We opened this option to students and faculty, but we didn't say, okay, look, so you have to use this. No, we just said this is as an option for you, and then student loved it. So so we grew very fast. So far, this pilot was very successful. So we are planning to open it for the all faculty in the spring, and obviously we'll have this whole marketing campaign so everybody will know about it. Because we are small and we have to work with central team. Initially, we didn't want to use our enterprise Active Directory because the integration piece with the central IT would probably took a year or so. So we use the simple AD, and we'll eventually integrate with our enterprise Active Directory, but to kind of speed up the process, we use what AWS offers. Okay, so I'm doing with time. Is it still okay? Okay. So I want also to show you kind of 3 different perspectives with Amazon Workspaces. So from the faculty perspective, this is what makes, I think, this service great. We don't necessarily do it for our faculty. That is the kind of traditional approach. But with Workspaces, what we allowed faculty to decide how they want to do it, and that allows them to keep the unified learning experience, teaching experience. So the way we do it, we basically give a faculty access to the workspace, and we ask them, okay, you install the application the way you want it, and you configure it the way you want it, and then you test it with your data sets, or if this is a static application, or you tell us if it's working for you or not. Once this is done, we capture this workspace, and we provision to all the students that are in that class or that require to have access to it. So this way, we eliminate this constant problem that something is not working and we don't know how to fix it, we don't know how to support it. And frequently with unique applications, that's the case. When we install it and we think it's working, but then we get a call from the faculty that's like, oh, this feature doesn't work, and we don't even know what to do after we launch the application, right? So, or the faculty uses a data set that produces an error, and we never have access to data set in the first place, so we don't even have the ability to test it. So this is great that workspaces allow us to work from the completely different perspective than the traditional VDI, where you create a gold image and you provision. There's no really a setup time. Though at least the way we use it is just so quick that if a faculty comes to me and says, I need this application for the class that is in 30 minutes, I can do it. It's that fast, because obviously depending on the complexity of the application, but assuming this is something simple to install but highly custom, highly unique, then the speed is fantastic with Workspaces. It's very easy to access. Students. Okay, maybe we'll talk about students in a second. So it's easy user management, because we most of the time we provision those workspaces that are customized for their needs for the entire class. So and also the faculty have the easy support, because they prepare that image, they prepare that application, they know it the best. We don't have to engage with this difficult conversations where we say, look, we think it's working, and we don't know how to fix it, right? So faculty are now the first line of support, which works for both of us. From the student perspective, they have the unified learning experience because everybody has access to the same thing. There is no setup time. in a few slides, I will show you how we do it for statistical applications that work on Macs, and so that will more speak about why it's so easy to access it. There's data security, okay, and we use Amazon Workdocs that are integrated with Workspaces for the document management. From the IT perspective, like I mentioned, it's very easy to support it because we don't do that much. A lot of work is done by faculty. It's very easy to provision and maintenance those images. We can constantly update them and re-provision, so students don't really have the downtime. And Workspaces also have this great mode that allows to stop the running instance when you don't use it. So it's very popular because most students they are not like in corporate world. They don't work from 9 to 5. They do their assignments only certain times of week. They work heavily before the finals. They work on the Workspaces before the due dates for the assignments. And we don't pay for all the time that the Workspaces otherwise would be, running idle. We can use a lot of, we can run the dedicated reports. And the last slide I wanted to show you is the most use case for at least in business schools is the support for applications that they don't natively run on Windows, on Macs. So Windows applications that they run on. We have frequently a problem with students who come to us and say, look, we were supposed to install this application, for example, JUMP, or SPSS, or a Microsoft project. A Microsoft project is the best, probably, example. And the faculty told us that there is a way to install this application on our Mac. Only we have to install Windows, first configure the Mac to install Windows, then install this application. We don't know how to do it. It takes 6 hours, and they fail frequently, and then it's very difficult to support a large number of students. So we use Workspaces for that, and the provisioning of that desktop is just a matter of seconds. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right. So hopefully, I think that's very interesting, the differences here, as we kind of talked about before. You've got a lot of different approaches. This is why we provide APIs. We provide the mechanisms for scaling up, scaling down, managing, and getting metrics and data. Very different approaches here around, in Greg's case, packaging Workspaces up in a web application effectively to allow access to a broad range of students around the globe. And in Peter's case, making it available as a sort of lab replacement on a smaller scale basis where the faculty and staff directly are making a lot of the decisions about what goes into that content. That kind of diversity of use case is really what we want to support from the Workspaces side. So I wanted to transition. We've got about 25 minutes left, and wanted to talk about, kind of give some questions to these guys, and have some feedback from them a little more candidly as well. And then we're going to have a chance for questions from the audience as well. What we'd ask is when we get to that, there's a microphone up here at the front. If you can just come up to the microphone just so everybody can hear you, and that way we can get the questions that way. So I wanted to start, guys, and get as a first question, we hear a lot in the education space that there's kind of some differences on the budgeting process versus some of the traditional IT space and corporate world. How does Workspaces fit inside of that? So Greg, is there any kind of difference for you, capital expenditure versus OpEx, and kind of how does that play?
So for us, this was really about tying it to our student experience, and the ideal was creating this OpEx flexible expense that we could do. which was what we were planning on doing in the RFP session as well. But the way we funded this was through a business plan that I wrote and proposed to our executive council. We asked for a bunch of cash for the first year plus staffing. And so we're running it out of OpEx, and it's working really well. It was easy to go through as part of our classroom experience for our students.
Yeah, got it. Were there any challenges for you guys, Peter, or is it kind of part of the course?
For us, it worked great in a sense that we tried the traditional, more traditional approach and then pay up, CapEx, pay up front, and there was always a problem with finding the number of faculty who really want to engage with this type of project. And it was difficult to estimate the number of students that would, who will use it. So that, it was difficult from the financial perspective to make a decision because we couldn't get the number, and that's all our financial director always wanted to tell me the number.
Yeah. Effectively, it's the pay-as-you-go element, so you can just use a little bit to get started. Winds up being big. I'm kind of curious, what do you guys view as the biggest challenges? When you did this process, obviously we worked together a lot, so I know some of the challenges, but I would love to kind of say, Peter, maybe from your perspective, start, what do you kind of view as the big learnings for you going through this?
From our perspective, the biggest challenge was maybe the approach because of the approach that we took, we wanted faculty to drive this project more. Yes. And it's not that easy to find, the volunteers to do it because everybody is busy and they have more traditional way of doing things. Right. But once we got a few people on board now, it becomes very popular.
Good. So effectively that kind of finding an owner, somebody who's motivated and great.
So our biggest challenge was actually with our cybersecurity program, and they're very much interested in kind of owning the entire process and providing the solution and we implementing. The way we set up this process in this project team was to act as the startup that did A to Z. Right? We leveraged our faculty for what they were really good at, the learning lessons and teaching and the education piece. And then we were designed and we were supposed to be the experts in the technologies piece. And all of the other departments were very willing to do that and like, hey, get this off my plate, that's fantastic. Although when you're dealing with folks who do this for a living in cybersecurity, they want to keep their hands on it. That was actually our biggest challenge. I mean, there's some little technical things here and there, but those get worked out. It's the people part that was a challenge for us.
Interesting. So do you think if that's something where looking back, you should have engaged that process sooner, or were there ways that could have helped that? Or
so there are some things that could have helped. The program is in transition itself, and having a little bit more runway with the team, the cybersecurity folks, I think would have helped. But we got the green light for this project in end of June. Yeah. So from between June and the end of August, we had to hire 10 people, solution the 14 or 15 classes that we were going live in, provision, create the integrations. So we didn't have a lot of time to spend with the departments. We're now going back as we have a little bit more time as we're ramping up our next 15 or 20 courses for the spring to engage them and bring them part of the process. They're coming kicking and screaming on the requirements, not solutions.
Okay, got it. So if anybody has questions, feel free to come up. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to ask whatever questions I like. So we'll keep going that way. What features do you guys want to see next in Workspaces? Where do you feel like there's some innovation to be driven?
If this is free reign, that's great. I would love to see the ability for us to be able to have dynamic RAM and CPU allocations. I think that would be a fantastic thing for us. We have a couple programs that need more than the RAM that we can do today. We have a couple programs that we could dial back a little bit, and be able to do that as students go on from course to course. Because our approach is that once you're a student enrolled in a program that uses this workspace is yours for life. As a student. Yeah. And so, yes, the student is. There are classes that will require more CPU and more RAM. We'd love to be able to take advantage of that.
That raises a question for me. I don't know for either of you guys. What do you guys do for retention of workspaces? I mean, how long do they stay around? Do you turn them on and turn them off?
We don't have those businesses
Okay, got it.
yet. So
It hasn't
we're
come up yet.
only in our first semester, so if we keep them around on off, we're fine.
So the semester is about to end, so we are kind of getting to that point, and we because in our case is kind of the workspaces are dedicated to a particular class, then we'll terminate those.
Got
and
it.
then create
So these are
new-
kind of different approaches. You've got a class-focused workspace. You've got a student-focused workspace.
If we had the ability to do, in the AC2 world, basically the AMI, take it offline if a student's not enrolled in class, and then bring it back online if they re-enroll, because it's not uncommon for our students to take a semester off in the process.
Right. So going beyond just the auto-stop workspace, but
Correct.
actually kind of cold storing it somewhere.
Correct.
Okay. Good feedback. Yeah, got a question.
I hate to interrupt this great discussion, but I do have 2 questions.
Yes.
What are you doing for operating system patch management? Are you leveraging AWS Workspace patch management, or are you doing it on your own?
So we are doing it on our own. We are a BYOL, or a bring your own license customer. We're running a Windows 7 native image in the workspace, and we have our kind of weekly patch process that we take advantage of. We're running our own WSUS servers and patching and approving patches as we go through.
Okay. And the other part of that is, what are you doing for application deployment within this environment? Because obviously you don't want to build all of your applications into every single image.
Right.
It's a kind of a waste of space for the same image for everybody.
So there's a core set of applications that we've defined, stuff like Chrome, Office. Those are part of the core image that we deploy to a student. Most of our introduction courses, that's the only thing they actually need. So as a student enrolls, and we get that enrollment information from our learning management platform, we provision them within a group that gives them access using WAM to the applications that are assigned to that course. So if you're in a cybersecurity 610 course, these are the set of applications that you get access to. You get assigned an Active Directory to that group, and WAM provisions that information, those applications to your
And so
workspace.
WAM is the Workspaces
I'm sorry.
application manager, for those who haven't seen it, part of the product set for Workspaces, for app packaging and distribution to Workspaces.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah. Another question?
Do you have any challenges with software licensing at all? And how did you tackle that? So I think, when you're installing virtual environments or cloud environments, some vendors aren't very happy with that.
You want to go first?
Well, So I think everybody who ever tried to
Yes.
work with a cloud solution, not necessarily AWS, but any, that is one of the biggest challenges. So you have to work with the vendor, and this is completely independent from the platform that you use. But obviously, yeah, we had the challenges with the software, and some companies are very difficult to work with, and some companies are okay, and more and more companies actually they're interested in this type of deployment. So.
And for us, we have any piece of software that's used by any faculty, staff, or student associated with the university for academic use actually needs to go to a EULA approval process. So obviously kind of that process is a little bit cumbersome for us at the moment. But we have a kind of large operating system vendor that we had a problem with, that we had some challenges related to our licensing agreement that it took a few weeks to get worked out, to add in clauses to allow us to run Project in Visio for student use in a cloud environment. They will make it work for you if you push them hard enough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'll comment that we have from the Workspaces side, with Workspaces Application Manager, you can buy applications through the marketplace, through AWS Marketplace, and those are all licensed by the month typically. So those are kind of, we've predefined licensing arrangements that work with those vendors. Microsoft is one of those. I mean, guessing that's maybe who you mean.
Maybe.
Microsoft is one of those, and there are a lot of applications there that are licensed in a way that's very consumable for the cloud.
And we do actually leverage some of those for our course. There was no need for us to do PDF management. We just used the apps that were there, or Putty, or those kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What differences in cost have you seen relative to your previous virtualized desktop environment, if whatever that may have been?
Yeah, whoever.
So for us, the big difference, I not necessarily want to say the number, but but the big difference is that with when we initially looked at the workspaces, there was no auto pause feature. Yeah. And that we kind of were on the fence. As soon as as soon as we took advantage of that, the cost dropped significantly because we simply don't pay for what we don't use, and other vendors, they will charge you, even if they have pay-as-you-go model, they will charge you per month. But like I said, our students don't use the desktops the same way the corporate world uses. So, we pay only for this very small times when they use the applications that they need. So that the cost is much lower.
And we're also using the auto-stop model, but what we found is the solution that we created was much more usable and user-friendly, that our students wanted to use it more. Based on our usage statistics. So as any kind of consumable product, right, your costs are going to go up if they're using it more. But the trick is they're using it more, they're happier with it, they're more likely to enroll. There's a whole bunch of benefits associated with it that we'll be looking at as we move forward in time.
Yeah, and with AutoStop, obviously, if they get to that point where they're exceeding that threshold, you can convert from AutoStop to always on anytime during the month, and then we prorate the back half of that month. So you can optimize that as much as you want to via APIs.
Well, and our average user was using it 8 hours a month, the previous VDI solution. Now they're using 30 hours a month.
Yeah.
So, they like it.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Yeah.
Do you have all of your virtual desktops in the same region?
In the same region?
In the region.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. We certainly see customers with a lot of diversity, but yeah.
Yeah, hi, 2 questions. If I understand, well, you can just answer. Would this solution be appropriate for a self-paced lab environment, meaning a person had access to an account where they could start up instructions on how to run a lab, and then they could start up a workspace on demand? In other words, not scheduled, but just basically use as needed. And if that were the case, do you basically provision a workspace per student? Or can they be auto-spawned in some manner?
So you could use the API, and I'll defer to you in just a second. We can use the API to spawn a workspace, certainly. There's a startup time. There's a ramp time that it takes to get a workspace to fully working order. And that can range, I've seen it really, really quick, in 5-minute time period to about this stated time, which is about 20 minutes. So if you're doing a self-paced lab, I would imagine a student might get a little frustrated with it if they have to do that every time they're going through. There are maybe some other offerings. AWS has EC2 instances that are behind kind of an auto-scale group that might be able to support that in some way. But getting into the requirements, I'm sure we could come up with a solution that would work for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just echo the same thing, which is that the idea with AutoStop Workspaces is to try and address that use case, so that you've got when they stop using it, it pauses, and then it gets stored. There is a storage fee per month, effectively, so that is the kind of downside there versus spinning them up. We've had people do kind of exotic things where they'll have pre-provisioning and shared usernames and passwords, and kind of try and work around that to have a pool of available workspaces ahead of demand. But broadly, we've just seen people using AutoStop for it.
Oh, great, thanks. And the second question, would this solution be appropriate for applications that require high-end graphic support, like high-end CAD CAM systems?
I can speak to that if you want. I don't know if you're...
There's an exciting announcement that Nathan...
well, certainly. So we offered, starting last week, we started offering support for GPUs. Graphics Workspaces launched, available by the hour. We think, from what we're hearing from customers, a pretty big revolution in not having to go buy workstation class hardware and just spin it up when they need it and use it. So,
great, thank you.
Hi, that dovetails great into the next question. So with the recent announcement of the HTML5 canvas-based interface, I was kind of curious how you expect that to potentially affect your use cases.
This is, I'm sorry, the HTML5.
The HTML5 canvas, you don't need a native client anymore.
Yeah.
You just have a web browser,
Yeah.
and you actually have the desktop in your browser.
Yes.
Being able to interact with it. So I was just curious, like that was a recent announcement. Like
Yeah,
last
so
week,
you mean the workspaces
Yes.
web access? Yeah, so the web access,
Right.
just to be pedantic, the web access stuff is based on WebRTC and not native HTML5. So WebRTC enabled browsers are where it's running right now. So that's Chrome and Firefox.
Right, so I was just curious how that affects your use cases.
Yeah. Well, you guys are 100% dependent upon it, right?
We are 100% dependent on the web, the web client, web access from AWS right now. I need to learn a little bit more about the particular announcement.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, guys. Well, I want to say a lot of thanks to Greg and Peter for coming up and taking questions and pot shots. So certainly, if you guys have any questions after the session, we'll be up here. Remember to complete the evaluations, and then there are a number of other Workspaces sessions that are scheduled following this for the remainder of reInvent. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.